this way that we can become one with the source. That is an experience that's open to everyone. You don't even have to, work on. Some people just fall into that experience. Others work at it for a long time. But it's an experience, from my point of view, it's an experience I can have whenever I want it. And that is the experience of oneness, the experience of connecting, the experience where it's not an intellectual phrase about how we're all everything and nothing. It's not just an intellectual thought. It's a fact of experience, where you connect to this larger viewpoint. You might say, in my metaphors, that you become, you can express and you can become like the larger conscious system. You can see reality like the larger conscious system sees reality. You can become a part of that, share that, and when you do, and you talk to all these different sects and groups, and they all have the same thing in common. You can make that connection. You become one with it. When you become one with it, you lose your identity. I'm not Tom anymore when I'm one with that. I'm everything. I'm every blade of grass. I'm every leaf on every tree. I'm every human being. I'm every clod of dirt. I am aware of all of it, connected to all of it. It's all me. I'm all it. And I'm not Tom at all. Tom's gone. That personal identity has no place in it.
I think that a lot of people don't truly understand the depth of your insight into what you're doing. Like at face value, perhaps maybe someone might be considering you're taking a moment to ponder or think, but you're dipping into what a lot of people, New Age people, might call the Akashic record, or just a very now moment, and people are not aware that this is happening. And I think that's really profound. That people want to see that. Just like the instant amplitude that you and I have, it's just a collective awareness. And the more and more we get into these podcasts, we get to have this sort of very symbiotic relationship of we're pulsating together.
Right, absolutely.
And
the more the merrier.
yes,
we have to have lots and lots of people, and they don't even have to agree with us. They can be just more or less in the right direction, and we welcome them on board, because the more people who are resonating toward peace and love and caring and not being angry and so on, then the quicker we'll get there.
Oh, I totally agree. I had a guy. I had a brief podcast with a guy, and he was very conflicted with his perception of his absolute truth, and it came sort of like a crossroads, because he was having an issue with his definition of what out of body experience was, and then it sort of turned into a dialogue where he sort of was like well, that's not scientifically proven, so I'm out. Now you're speaking a lot of like gobbledygook that does not resonate with me. I can't justify this conversation. I was like, okay, I can appreciate you seeing things this way. Yet, I think on a deeper level, with your insight and your background, having sort of massaged your way into seeing things in the intellect and being able to construct from that, and then this, never-ending relationship that you've been aware of consciously in your lifetime, of this intuitive sense that you get these conflicts with people that are from the science-based community, this new language that we speak of that's only a couple of 100 years old, but this is their definition of knowing the absolute truth. And still to this day, I find that it's interesting that people speak on theories, hypotheses. These are still part of you as an experiencer, as someone that is seeking to remember who they are, we have this, just like the audience will realize, this amplitude that you and I have just instantly generated, this collective, oscillating energy that we're embodying. This is part of being in this present moment that I speak of. But then from a science sort of based sort of realization, you have people that will just shut you down, that don't want to have this conversation. I think that's why people embody your approach, that you have come from this background, the zeros and ones, the myopic sort of viewpoint of how things are supposed to be from this construct of what we call the language of science. And you've embodied it and shown the world that there's this deeper relationship, this intuitive understanding that goes beyond the science-based facts that people want to use as their definition of reality. So I've noticed this, and perhaps maybe we could speak on this now, is like the experiencer is far more interested in the experience than now the self-evident realization than perhaps what's on paper, what someone can show them from a theoretical lens of academia, and more, this is my experience, this is what I know, this is what I feel. And I think the feeling component is huge, that a lot of people don't address enough of. And I wanted you to sort of expand on how you embody that within your own journey to help people understand this, because you have this unique position where you're able to dive deep into the science-based facts, and that becomes very limited. Then your incredible insight is expanded on that from your theory and understanding of the universe, and it really resonates with so many people, whether you're left brain, right brain, no brain. People are getting this understanding, this feeling. And from a Taoist perspective, it's always the feeling. The feeling is the evidence-based. So we go back into indigenous ancient practices that are thousands of years old that I teach people from an alchemical process. And it really does, the self-evidence is the ability to transmute what someone would call within a science-based reality, a dimensional shift that would not necessarily be possible from this left brain perspective. So I thought maybe we could start with you having a little bit more sharing, because you make it look effortless. It is effortless when you truly understand what it means, yet perhaps maybe someone can get a deeper understanding from this perspective.
Yeah, okay. Well, to start with, there's a couple of things that I repeat over and over in my books, almost to the point of boredom. But one of them is, if it's not your experience, it's not your truth. And that's just a simple concept. So if you don't have experience, then it can't be your truth. You can read about it, you can read about other people's experience, but if you don't experience, it's somebody else's truth, not yours. And to think that you can gain that truth just by reading about it, of course, is foolishness. You can't. You have to experience it. So that's one thing I say over and over to my readers. The other thing I tell them is that you have to be skeptical. You have to be skeptical of everything, but you also have to be open-minded. You have to be open-minded of everything. So you need to be skeptical of every idea, every word, every thought, everything from everybody. Just when I mean everything, I mean everything. You have to be skeptical and you have to be open-minded. And if you just keep those three things together, that if it's not your experience, it's not your truth, always remain skeptical, but open-minded. And one last thing, do not get caught in a belief trap. Belief is the enemy. Have no beliefs whatsoever. Jettison all of your beliefs. It's not about belief. Belief is a trap. That's why that scientist, or that scientist-like person you were talking about, says, oh, I just can't go there, because he's trapped in a belief that says that what you're talking about can't exist. Therefore, he just can't go there because he knows that's just silliness and woo-woo and doesn't make any sense. And he knows that not because he's experienced that, a silliness, not because he's skeptical and open-minded, but because he's closed-minded. He has a belief. He believes that this reality is material-based. It's mass-based. And when you believe that, you also are required logically to believe in determinism. So materialism, or sometimes called physicalism, and determinism all go together. And when you're in that group, there's a few things that you have to believe in order to be logical in that group. And one of them is that there is no such thing as time. Present, past, and future all happen at once. Another silly thing is that there's no such thing as consciousness. Consciousness is just, hallucination. And also, the last thing is free will. There can be no free will. So, no time, no free will, no consciousness logically are required if you're also a materialist and determinist. All those things are logically, they're all connected logically. Now, on the opposite side, the very opposite side is consciousness, time, and free will. They all go together logically. You can't have one you can't have one without the other two. If there's no consciousness, then choice doesn't make any sense. So if you have choice, then it has to be free, or there is no choice. Time has to happen because there's before the choice and after the choice. You can't have consciousness if there are no choices. That's what consciousness does. It's aware and it chooses, and it then considers the choices it has. So, you can look at it logically like that. So people get themselves trapped. And if they would just be skeptical, and I must say the first person that you must be skeptical about is yourself. You should be more skeptical about yourself than anybody else, because you have a tendency to walk into beliefs that are comfortable for you, to wrap yourself in beliefs that feel good. And you have to be skeptical of yourself. And you also have to be open-minded. And many people have this idea that if a new idea comes to them, then they have two choices. They either have to accept it or reject it. And that's not a good way to look at things. If a new idea comes to you, you need to put that idea somewhere on a, I don't think it's a good idea, or I do think, but it's not, hardly anything should ever be a 0 or a 1. This is false. This is true. Because once you do that, you've slipped into a belief, because you don't know everything. You don't know what kind of information you're going to get in the future that might change your mind. Therefore, you have to live gracefully with uncertainty, instead of saying, well, I need certainty because uncertainty frightens me. So I need certainty, therefore I believe this or I don't believe that. I'll just come to one of those two conclusions. Well, either one of those generally puts you in a belief box, or what I call, a belief jail, that you can't get out of. So these are just a few basic philosophical ideas that I try to reiterate to my readers and listeners. If they just keep those few things in mind, they will eventually get to the right answer. If they stay open-minded, they realize it's not, it's not their truth, if it's not their experience. What does that mean? That means go out and find that experience. Don't sit around and wait for that experience to come to you one day. You have to go pursue it. You have to learn how to meditate. You have to learn how to quiet your mind. You have to learn how to be in touch with your intuitive self, and then learn to be in touch with other people's intuitive selves, and then learn to communicate mind to mind, and then learn to get data out of those databases that are available to you. All of those things, you have to experience it. And once you experience it, you have to play with it. you have to work with it until it's not possible in your mind to be just something you're imagining. You have to play with it for a few months or a few years until you understand that it is real beyond you. And that takes experience. You can't experience something once and then judge whether it's something you've imagined or something that's real beyond your own mind. That takes time. And that people want to judge right away. One or a zero. I had an experience, one or a zero. And that generally throws them off into a belief, one way or the other. Belief for, belief against, doesn't matter. It's all belief, and all belief is a drag. All belief is like a cement block, fastened to your back while you're trying to swim. Belief is just constantly dragging you back into old ideas and familiar ways of being, familiar truths, familiar ideas that don't really take you anywhere important, but they just feel good because that's what you're used to thinking, and that's what your parents thought, and that's what your grandparents thought. So you're comfortable in those thoughts, but you don't learn much if you stay comfortable. You need to be able to get outside that comfort zone and go find out. Make it your experience. You want to learn how to heal someone with your mind? It's not hard. It's an easy thing to do. Go do it. Anybody with 3 months worth of serious practice can be successful. It's not like, oh, it'll take you 20 years to learn how to do this. You want a remote view? You can be I don't know, at least a 30, 40% right remote viewer, probably in, again, 3 or 4 months of practice, serious practice. It's not hard. You want to be able to hear other people's thoughts. You want to be able to feel their feelings, know what they're thinking and feeling in their mind, and then mind to mind, share thoughts with them. It's not that hard. Again, these things aren't like you have to spend 20 years in a monastery to learn how to do this. You don't. You can learn this in months, but you have to really want to learn it. You have to really dedicate yourself to doing the hard work that it takes to first discipline your mind and then disciplining your imagination. You need both of those to be disciplined. Then it helps if you have some sense of the structure, the nature of reality, because then you have a framework that everything just kind of falls into place where it's supposed to be, and you know why it's there and how how you can use it and so on. But that's not really necessary. You can experience a whole lot of things without any specific plan on what you're doing or why it works. Just do it. And what that does is it opens your mind a crack. You just get that crack of sunshine into your mind that says, oh, geez, reality is bigger than I thought. Reality isn't just, the physical world, the objective world. And that's an easy thing to explain to people. The objective world is the world of science. Science doesn't get outside of that objective world. Science says if it's not in the objective world, it's an illusion. The objective world is all there is. Everything else is an illusion. Well, anybody can just sit for a minute and think, what is it that's most important in your life? What have been the important things, the important choices? Should I marry Susie or should I marry Jill? Should I take this job or that job? Truth, justice, caring, relationship, love. All of those things are not in the objective world. All those things are in the subjective world. And that's where all the meaning is in life. It's those kinds of choices, those kinds of decisions, those kinds of things that you live with. So, I like to make the analogy of it's like, you go to a play and there's the props, and the props are important, but that's the objective world. It's just the props. And then there's the ideas that the players are saying, the things they're, what they're doing, how they're interacting with each other, the storyline, the angst, the love, the caring, all of that's going on in the story. And that's the subjective part. Well, How many people go to a play to watch the props? You know, nobody. The props are nice, but that's not the story. What's important in your life is the story, the relationships, the connections, the love, the caring, the giving. How can you help? All those things are important and significant. Concepts like justice and good and bad and morality, those are not objective. Those are all part of the subjective world. Well, how would you like to dispense with, morality and good and bad? These are things that make our life meaningful and make us able to live together in some form of civilization. And they're all subjective. So this idea that only the objective world exists and the subjective world is all an illusion, that's obviously kind of a dumb idea. The big part of the world that's important and significant is all subjective. So what you learn is, once you get past this point of being trapped by your beliefs, opening your mind to new experiences, then being serious about going after the experiences that you'd like to learn about, things that you're intrigued about. Work on it, be serious about it. Then it's easy to connect to the intuitive. You see, you got two ways. Your consciousness has two ways of processing information. I don't know if we said this last time or not, but there's just two ways of processing information. One of them is through an intellectual track, and that's basically logic. The other one is intuition. Intuition is not logic at all. There's no logic involved in intuition. Intuition is just knowing. You don't have to have a logical path. This leads to that, leads to the next thing. Intuition, you just know. So it's beyond logic. You have both of those paths. Typically in our culture, the path of the intellect is dominant, way dominant. It's so dominant that it doesn't even like its little brother, the intuitive path, and denies that it even exists, or gives it a hard rap like, yeah, okay, that's a gut guess or something, but they're wrong as much as they're right. You can't trust that intuition. It'll give you all kinds of garbage. So they kind of had that attitude. So we have this dominant attitude that is all about the intellect, and we spend most of our lives honing this intellect. We start in kindergarten. We hone this intellect, and we go through all the grades of school. We read books. We have conversations. We're constantly honing this intellect to get it better and better at logic, and better at coming up with good answers. And over on the intuitive side, we do nothing at all. It just sits there. And we humans, at least in our culture, we work at the intuitive level not even as well as a typical 3-year-old. A 3-year-old is more intuitive than we are. A 3-year-old has a more highly developed intuition than we do, because we've not worked on it or honed it. Now, what do you think we'd be like intellectually if we never honed or worked on our intellectual side? It's like the proverbial, child raised by wolves, right? It'd be you wouldn't have language, you wouldn't be able to understand or connect or do anything other than grunt and gestures with your wolf friends. So, well, that's the way it's like if you don't hone and practice your intuitive sides. You're like, raised by barbarians, not wolves. All you can think of is the present moment, and you go to the play just to look at the props. Just to look at the backgrounds. You miss the whole play that's going on because you're enamored with the background. So anyway, these are just some ways to think about it, to help people open their mind to let in a bigger picture than just the physical. The physical is just a little piece of reality. It's not the whole reality. It's just a little piece of it. It's not even the most important piece. And once you do take the time to hone and polish and develop that intuitive side, you will find that it is more accurate and more reliable than your intellectual side. Not that it's, flaky and can't believe it. It's more accurate and more reliable than your intellectual side. Why? Because on the intellectual side, you have this logic, which is very precise, powerful tool, but you almost never have enough information to be logical about anything. Should I marry Sally or should I marry Sue? Well, go figure that out logically. You can't unless you have a little crystal ball that tells you, everything is going to happen in the future. You can't make those kinds of choices. So your logic is very limited by the amount of data it has. Should I take this job or that job? Should I quit my job and find another one? How should I raise my children? Should I, lock them up in a closet and make sure they don't do bad things, or should I, let them go out there and interact with the world the way they do? Well, you have no way to make those choices logically because you don't have enough information. So you get this great tool and hardly any enough information. On the other side, you have the intuitive side, and now you have all the information you could ever hope for. Almost everything worth knowing is available to you. Okay, and it's precise information, clear information. But what you have now, instead of a precise, clear tool, now you have a ratty tool. That ratty tool is your ability to work on the intuitive side because you've never honed it. It's wild. It doesn't, it doesn't have structure. It doesn't have understanding. So you have that ratty tool for your intuition. It depends on how you feel. It depends on your attitude. It depends on what you eat. It depends on how much sleep you've had. It depends on 100 different things. And if you don't hone it and work to develop it, it'll always give you a different answer because you'll be different every time you ask the question. You'll be coming from a different mind space. And mind space is everything. Intent is everything. And if your intent is slopping, is sloppy and all over the place, then the answers you get back are going to be sloppy and all over the place. So, that's kind of the way we pieces of consciousness are. We have those two ways in which we can function, in which we can process information. Now, what I've found that as I've grown older and gotten, my intuitive side more polished and capable, and I've got an intellectual side that's very polished and capable too. I'm a extreme left brain and an extreme right brain, both at the same time. So, so what I've learned is that my life now, I live probably 75, 80% out of my intuitive side because that side is just more knowledgeable and more reliable, has a bigger picture. And then about the other 25% or so, 20%, is my intellect because I have things, you need an intellect. An intellect is a necessary part of the process. You have to have an intellect. You have to compare. You have to judge. You have to assess. You have to do these, and that's what the intellect does. But all that comparing and judging and analyzing will just stop your intuitive side from working if you can't keep it under control. So you have to let those two work together. And it's not that hard to do, but you can get your intuitive side and your intellectual side to work as teammates. They each one does what they do best, and they pitch in just when the other one needs them, and they work back and forth. They hand the problem off. Here, you get the data, and I'll do the assessment. And you just, they just work together seamlessly to provide you with good understandings and good information and a good sense of what's going on. Whereas if you just use one or the other, well, if you're just, in the intuitive side and don't have an intellect, well, then what people call you names like airhead or space cadet or something like that. You're kind of out there and dreamy, but you don't ever seem to be plugged into what's happening in the world. And if you're unbalanced the other way, where you're all intellect, it's the same thing. You're only aware of one tiny little piece of reality when you're living in a much bigger reality. And for that matter, this reality that we call the physical universe, that's only a tiny piece of a larger reality. This physical universe is another small piece. There's a lot to reality that has nothing to do with this physical universe or, human beings. It's a big space,
Hmm.
and it's all part of what I call the larger consciousness system. And you, as consciousness, can explore that space. You're a part of it. You're part of the thing that creates that space. So it's all yours to learn from and to experience. But if all you do is just live in this tiny little corner of a tiny little corner, which is your life in this universe, then of course you're going to be limited. Of course you won't be able to heal people with your mind or, do any of the paranormal things, but that paranormal things are not important. They're just stuff that you can do because consciousness lets you do that, but they're not really important. Anybody, at least I would think that anybody who gets really good at the paranormal things then decides not to bother with them anymore. They're not useful because you can create a bubble for yourself. At least this is my experience. You can modify future probability with your intent. Okay, so you can change what's likely to happen, and you can do that fairly powerfully if you have a powerful intent. But what happens is if you live your life that way, you make sure that everything that happens is pretty much the way you'd like it to happen. Everything's kind of optimized for you. So you're living in this bubble where you're never challenged. You're living in this bubble where, yeah, life is always good, nothing wrong or bad ever happens. And yes, if there's a big pile up on the highway, that's the time you decide to go home, the scenic route, and you miss it because you're aware, but you just make everything work good for yourself, living in a bubble that is never real surprising and never anything but good. Well, that takes away all your natural growth potential. The way people grow up is that stuff happens and we get to deal with it. And we grow up by the quality with which we deal with it. Do we deal with it with love? Do we deal with it with caring? Do we deal with it by being aware of how your choice affects other people? And you only make choices that are good for everybody, not just choices that are good for you. So if you can do these paranormal things, it makes the world a very nice place to live in. You just cut yourself off from the opportunities to learn. It's much better if you let the world just unfold however it does, because it is right exactly where it needs to be. The world is, I shouldn't say it's perfect the way it is. No, it's not perfect at all, but it's where it has to be to take the next step. Our world is so full of toxic elements. We have a lot of greed. We have a lot of nastiness. We have a lot of self-centeredness. We have, a lot of warring and people trying to grab this and grab that. Even our corporations and our institutions are grabby and power hungry. And we see all this and say, well, how horrible that is. But that's just us. That's an absolutely accurate view of the quality of consciousness of human beings. And when we human beings grow up and have more quality than that, all those institutions will just change by themselves. It's not that the institution is not the problem. The institution is a symptom of the problem. The problem is us, is we human beings with a very poor quality of consciousness. That's why we have all this dysfunctional stuff, not because of that bad dictator and that bad, politician and so on. We blame it on those people, but you have to blame it on yourself. We have to be careful to not be part of the problem, but rather to be part of the solution. And if you're standing on one side, shaking your fist at the other side, thinking, "How could those people be so stupid? How could they feel like that? How could they have that attitude? They're just so dumb. They just don't see reality, or they can't see anything." Well, your anger is part of the problem. If that makes you angry and you shake your fist in those people, you're part of the problem. You have to not be angry. You have to look at those people and say, wow, those people are unhappy. They're confused and unhappy and angry and miserable. I have, you know, I can empathize with them. I can, have what's the word? Compassion for them because they are lost in their own self-centeredness and their own needs and their own wants. They can see only what's, what's in front of them. They can't see a bigger picture. So you have compassion for them. And if you can help educate them, fine. But telling them that they're wrong doesn't educate them. It makes them back up into that position even more solidly. So you can't change another person. So what can you do for the world? Change yourself, because you're the only person you can change is yourself. Now, for other people, you can give them an environment in which it maybe would be easier for them to change themselves, but you can't change anybody. And that environment really means just giving them space to be who they are. That's about the best you can do. Give them a space where they don't have to be so frightened. Give them a space that's full of love and caring. And that will optimize the potential they have for growing up. So anyway, I've just rambled over a whole bunch of things that all kind of connected to each other, but that's kind of the big picture. Now I have a model that allows me to understand. Well, I have a better what physics than physics has now. I have a more complete physics. I can explain things that the physics now cannot explain. It's a completely logical model that is just a better assessment and predictor of the objective reality. But I also, what comes out of the same, and that comes just from understanding consciousness. But what comes from the same understanding is also a model of the subjective world. Why is the subjective world the way it is? Why are some people happy and other people miserable? And where do you find peace and tranquility and satisfaction? And I also have a model of that, an objective model of that. So you can objectively see, if you're not full of joy and peace and happiness, well, why not? There's reasons why not. And, that model can point to exactly what those reasons are. So I create these two models, one of the subjective world and one of the objective world, just out of an understanding of consciousness. Once you understand consciousness, then those two models just kind of come out. So consciousness is fundamental, and everything else, including physics, is deduced from or created from consciousness. So that's kind of where I am, and that's my model. So I've got this model. I got it in 3 books, that are my Big Tower trilogy, and I've got it in I don't know, 1,000 or more videos like this one, that's going to be out there. And I welcome all players to come. Matter of fact, one I had one instance where I was in a church venue. I was giving a talk, and this church, the basement of this church was very inexpensive, if not free. So that was a good venue for me because it didn't cost any money. So while I was there, I noticed that I had both the minister and the assistant minister there. So I put them on the spot and I said, okay, you two have PhDs in theology, right? And they said, yes, we do. And I said, well, then tell me, what are the attributes of God? And I said, I don't want any denominational, stuff. I just want the fundamental attributes of God. What are they? So they went off and they huddled and they came back about 10, 15 minutes later and they had a list of maybe 6, 7 things that they thought were the attributes of God. And as they went down the list, every one of those attributes of God was an attribute of the larger consciousness system. So you see, there you go. So this model also derives God, if you will. It kind of says what that has to be, and it's the larger consciousness system. It's the source. It's the source of, we are parts of that. Everything are parts of that. Our whole reality is a subset of that. So once you understand the nature of reality, you also understand theology, physics, and all the soft sciences, philosophy, all that stuff just unravels and is obvious. So that's the model.
Um, I would have to be one of the biggest fans of your understanding of the nature of reality, as for thousands of others throughout the world that truly appreciate your insight and just your experience being an experiencer through your natural born life. This sort of leads me to the very understanding of a Taoist seeker, right? So, we all have our own perspective, how we integrate this stuff. And I really love the way that you describe that relationship between conscious, unconscious, left and right brain, the realization that, you know, it's really a center point. So it's like good, bad, or indifferent. Where do we find the love, the symbiotic flow that some people would call, you know, the effortless action from a Taoist perspective, where you as a seeker are looking through this self-evident lens, as you also shared with the audience just before, this understanding, this knowing the absolute truth, right? Which everyone seems to go, well, I always remind people, if there's an absolute truth handed to you, about face and run in the other direction. Your absolute truth is your truth. Your truth is the only truth you need to be concerned with. And with that comes that experience, that amplitude, that energetic charge that you and I share through this conversation is the validation of the experiencer. It goes beyond anything that you can read in a book, but you will come back to the very simplicity of what we speak of within Taoism. We call it the bellows. And the bellows is basically contraction and expansion. And it's happening. You are all things and nothing at the same time. And then we look for the Death Star moment within Star Wars, the what we call the Wu Ji, the stillness, which would be derived from this idea of this polarizing effect of good and bad, up and down, in and out, yin and yang. And then you find that center point, which enters the mother, the Tao, all things, God, the large consciousness system. You are now being able to perceive things as one. And then you can have this subjective, objective reality, but with the knowing through your own cultivational practices, your own realization, this much deeper, solidified, fortified ability to use your attention intention to add to the collective. And I always tell people, it's like, okay, well, Jifu, I want to learn the Taoist alchemy and I want to levitate and heal and do all these things. And I'm like, that is an effect. I will call it a side effect of your journey as a Taoist seeker to come to this realization of the now moment. And we talk about this. It's like, oh, well, you're not a place, person, or a thing. You're just everything at once and nothing at the same time. And this is where people they scratch their head and they're like, wow, okay, that's a mind boggler for me. But yet, when you understand that that present moment is all things, and people go, well, hang on a second, but I could have sworn Tom said that you don't want to be in the present. There's a past and a present and a future, and that. This is the only validation that you as a seeker have. And that relationship, that experiencer, that exponential sort of like self-evident now is what will give you more of that embodiment of whole, of this beautiful relationship you have. And then people are like, well, Jeff, I want to learn the levitation. I want to learn the healing. I will teach you that on your journey. But the realization is you will come to this selfless place of servitude, of being at one with all, of creating a collective consciousness that raises humanity's awareness of what Tom and I have spoken on, the love. And that is something that is a default with all of us. And what we like to do within Taoism is return to that. You're returning to remembering that truth, your absolute truth, your now moment that gives you that embodied love. And so I like to remind people, you will return to realizing who you really are, which is love, which is acceptance, which is now. Now, the polarizing effect of that subjective, objective, a dance that we take as a human being subject to the human condition is how I like to see how Tom is sort of integrating the intellect with the intuitive, and that center point is what we call the Wu Chi, or Wu Wei is effortless action, effortless effort. There is nothing more than being now that realizes that probability that Tom speaks about, that we get to that point where your attention, intention of being now, of being in servitude, of being selfless, of contributing to the collective consciousness that raises humanity is just you just don't have to think, you know. And that knowing comes in the selfless act of being here, whether it's giving people, as Tom and I put these incredible conversations together, is sharing people this moment so they can look at this and embody the information and raise their own consciousness and go, oh my goodness, I never even processed that way. And just by listening, I have now raised my consciousness to a whole nother level of awareness. And from that is this bellows effect. And from within Taoism, we always say, okay, you are all things and nothing at the same time. Okay, that sounds like a double negative. How is that possible? Well, we talk about this as this is the gift of the mother, the now, the Tao, right? And man is not like that. And people are like, okay, well, last time I checked, I looked in the mirror. I am man. I am of planet Earth. I am human. And that's the separator. That's the part where people get all confused, where they are limited by the mundane sort of human condition that puts them into the intellect, that puts them into the 9 to 5, that puts them into everything is a problem that I have to solve that has a negative effect. And this is the positive and negative that Tom and I have spoken of before, looking at things, is it half empty or half full? I mean, let's get right down to the get down. The simplicity of that will summarize and put together everything as this present moment. And so people get all, oh my goodness. And so when you realize, and from Jade Emperor, who's a teacher of mine, which is really a facet, I want people to be aware, all the insight, when I channel information, just as Tom does, he doesn't refer to it as a specific energy or entity. He's just like doing it all the time. If you look at it from an auric field level, or you have some level of clear sense, you will see that he is constantly taking information in at the now moment that gives him the incredible insight that is the intuitive side of who he presents himself to the rest of the world as. And it's profound stuff. You watch it charge in, it amplifies, it expands. And you may take a pause where he closes his eyes or he looks to the ceiling, and it's profound, and it's happening as we speak on a constant, which I think is really, really beautiful to witness that. And so when you accept and which is that feeling, that experience, a moment of feeling, when you know you are not of this body, what can harm you?
Yeah,
Nothing.
there's lots and lots of different groupings, like Taoism, Zen. There's every major religion has its mystical group. The Jews have the Kabbalah, and the Islam has the whirling dervishes, and there are mystical schools around, and each one has their own vocabulary, their own symbols, their own metaphors for how they put their understanding into words that will communicate in whatever their natural language is. But all of those share the same experience, and that is the experience of oneness, the experience of connecting, the experience where it's not an intellectual phrase about how we're all, we're all everything and nothing. It's not just an intellectual thought, it's a fact of experience, where you connect to this larger viewpoint. You might say in my metaphors that you become, you can express and you can become like the larger conscious system. You can see reality like the larger conscious system sees reality. You can become a part of that, share that. And when you do, and you talk to all these different sects and groups, and they all have the same thing in common. You can make that connection. You become one with it. When you become one with it, you lose your identity. I'm not Tom anymore when I'm one with that. I'm everything. I'm every blade of grass. I'm every leaf on every tree. I'm every human being. I'm every clod of dirt. I am aware of all of it, connected to all of it. It's all me. I'm all it. And I'm not Tom at all. Tom's gone. That personal identity has no place in it. You are connected with everything. And I've heard this description hundreds of times from different people, different sects, different everything. And it's all the same experience. It's just dressed up in different metaphors and different feelings. But this way that we can become one with the source, that may be just one way to put it, become one with the source. That is an experience that's open to everyone. You don't have to, you don't even have to, work on. Some people just fall into that experience. Others work at it for a long time. But it's an experience, from my point of view, it's an experience I can have whenever I want it. I don't do it that often because in my mind it's sort of a sacred experience that you don't overuse to the point of it becoming common, because it's never common. It's always totally beyond description. And my little effort to describe it to you is but a shadow of a shadow. So when you have this experience of connecting and having basically the viewpoint of source, then all of the things that you're talking about aren't just words to be understood. They're not metaphors they're not poetry. They're an actual fact. It's the way it's the way it is. You are everything and, nothing, meaning not yourself. You are everything and nothing. And it's just an accurate description of that experience. And yet, when you tell that to people, it's like, you're saying the opposite things. You are, but you aren't. You're tall, but you're short. You're heavy, but you're light. And it just seems to people that you're saying impossible things that don't make sense. But that experience is available across the board, and you don't have to belong to any sect. You can just be yourself, a group of one, and you can have that same experience. It doesn't take friends to get you there. It's just a matter of letting go and connecting to the source. And from my perspective, that's available anytime you want it, anytime you need it. For me, like I say, I don't do it that often because it's something that should be cherished, not just, it's not something you roll around in because it feels good. It's some experience that gives you perspective, that gives you, kind of returns you to the source for a little bit. And it is used wisely and only as necessary. But anyway, we talk about the different words and the metaphors and so on, but this experience is universal. Anybody if they can let go of their ego and let go of their fears and just be, you can experience it. Again, it's not that difficult. You just have to clear all the junk out of your mind that keeps you from that experience, which is mostly your fear and your ego and your beliefs. If you can jettison those things, then it's there whenever you want it. It's just a part of your existence that you have that perspective, that connection with source. So it's open. It's not a closed, it's not just for this sect or that sect, although each of the sects kind of make their own special ceremonies around it and their own special metaphors for it and their own special whatevers, but it's just a matter of becoming one with the source.
I think that you make a really good point, and through all the podcasts that I've experienced with all the different guests that I've spoken to, there is this universal understanding. The absolute truth is for you, the seeker, to decide what that is. I always remind people there's a million ways up the mountain. Within a Taoist path, it's yin and yang. There's two sides of the mountain. You move up to that point and you become realized one with all things. But that's that polarizing effect that we're subject to. And I think more, if someone was listening to this conversation, and there's so many nuggets that are being presented to the audience constantly through our conversation, the deeper understanding is like, okay, so get there. The reason I feel a lot of people gravitate to a Taoist sort of path is more the idea it's not religion, it's a philosophy that sort of integrates into some sort of metaphysical sort of realization. For me, I always remind people it's a template to enhance your own experience. And through the methods that we use through the Taoist alchemy, it becomes fortified and solidified as something that is repeatable, which I think is most important, because this is where you get to a point of delusion. When you're not able to validate it for yourself, it just seems like a fleeting moment that you're having in your mind, a psychotic episode, something of that nature, where once that energetic potential has been realized, I think this is a big thing for a lot of people in this new age spiritual path is, I've felt energy. I've channeled the Palladians. I've got 100,000 YouTube followers. I'm all one with all things. But what I've found and realized through my own conversation with many people in this space is this level of realizing mortality is real. And so there is this juxtapose of, oh, well, hang on, we're talking about the Taoist path of immortality, and the internal alchemy is part of that path from a Taoist seeker. We want to immortalize this potential to level up your consciousness in this reality through this lifespan. By doing that, you saturate the physical body, you become in tune with this oneness that Tom and I speak of, and then you can start maestroing the energetic potential of this physicality. What most people tend to not realize is everything, your attention intention is not just subject to mystical, paranormal, intuitive moments that Tom and I are speaking of. Every time you put your attention intention to anything, whether you're an attorney, a skydiver, a politician, a janitor, a Dalai Lama, your energy is going to be transmuted in that direction. That means that if you have the inability to realize that there is a free flow of this, that everything is abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, and the potential of that is the knowing, that experiencer gets to access that knowing. And it's not just this physical, because a lot of people that I come across are healers, psychics, doctors, nurses, massage therapists, light workers, and they come for the knowing of, I've exampled this, but at the end of my day, I'm exhausted. At the end of my week, I'm exhausted. Thank goodness it's Friday. You have the Monday blues. There's this evidence of exhaustion, which is why within Taoism, we speak of the bellows, and that the universe is the bellows, this contracting and expanding at all times, and that man is not like this. When you don't identify with the simplicity of that, you truly embody what Tom and I are speaking of, you can now cultivate this realization that the potential is unlimited. The potential is endless. And so when people limit themselves, they tend to find exhaustion. They tend to find that the red flag from me, and I'll share that with people, your instant red flag for your intuitive state of awareness is, I'm exhausted. At the end of my day, I'm tired. Like, I don't think people understand. Like when Tom and I have conversation, like the last one, I think we round up because we both have wives and we realize we still want to stay married, but the conversation continues. Now, whether you're in a biological timeline of mine or Tom's, this ability to stay in tune with now and endless amounts of energy is present. This is a knowing that comes with the experiencer, and it's validated through a method or a practice. I would like you to share a little bit with the audience that sort of this understanding of the larger consciousness system is really profound for many, but then to attune to a method, and that's why Taoism, I believe, people gravitate to, because, okay, I have a way to cultivate. We saturate the cell, this physical cells, we get this chi packing. There's a process where people have this substance. They call it the substance, where it's the chi, the mother, the God, Tao. It's present and you can feel it. Like just as Tom and I can feel the amplitude of energy that is being transmitted within this conversation, so can the experiencer, so can the audience. And that's a tuning. Now, is it never present? It's always present. It's just like everything. It's now. And you have to create an awareness. Now, that awareness can be developed by just listening to our conversation, and all of a sudden you wake up tomorrow and you're the next coming of Jesus Christ. You're a healer. You're an awakened, enlightened being. But then there's this effect that comes with it, as Tom has already presented to the audience, this understanding that how boring would life be if you didn't have peppering of a few interesting events that you would have to apply the intellect and the intuitive to create this now moment. And so you get subject to what some people would consider the 3D, or what someone would decipher as these dimensional shifts, and how people perceive things, that they're stepping into a fourth dimension, observing a third dimension, this idea of space-time, time-space, how you're being recording this experience. So method-wise, even though you're an OG, I'm an OG in this space of understanding, and I'm spiritually multitasking as we speak. I'm in all dimensions at once because this is what I have the ability to cultivate and do. So whether you consciously see me sitting here talking to Tom, I'm bathing in, the sun, the moon, the earth. I'm embodying myself in a constellation and feeling the visceral kinesthetic effects of that from a physicality perspective, because I want to, and I can access that. This is what we call out-of-body stuff that some people might constrain to this sort of sleep paralysis, near-death experience, OBE. This is sort of like a starting point. It's like the seed for the seeker, this taste. They get a glimpse of something and they want to go further. This is their idea of there's something beyond this reality that I thought was just a human experience. Now I'm looking at things, holy moly. I heard voices from my dead grandmother. I saw apparitions. I had this expansive feeling that I'm all things. How would you perceive it now that you've been? And so for a Taoist, once you continually cultivate these things, it becomes instantaneous. It may be a journey that you consciously are aware of, and you started, and it may take you space-time or time-space perceptive-wise a certain amount of commitment from you as a seeker to cultivate that. And over your journey, it becomes more and more concentrated, where you are just now. You are just there. You are just all things. And so you've been doing this for very consciously many decades and teaching people for many decades. What would be an entry-level observation of this sort of starting the cultivation? Hey, I had a near-death experience. I've read Tom's book. Now I want something that's practical that I can validate and verify for myself, that's repeatable for my journey. Does that make sense?
Okay. Oh, I got a couple of things. There was a kind of a long list of, of questions in there. Um, yes, I have similar kinds of experiences as you. Um, I know when I'd be giving talks to people, and these talks would often be, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 3 days. Sometimes they were 5 days. But I'd stand up at a podium and I would kind of talk all day long, 6 hours, 7 hours. And I have people come up and said, "You never even take a break to go to the bathroom. How do you do that? You stand up, all day long, you're talking, you're on." And I tell them that I get energy from communicating with people, from being helpful to other people. It doesn't sap my energy, it gives me energy. And by the end of a long day of speaking and talking and answering questions and doing things, I'm energized, not worn out. Well, it works kind of the opposite way. And bodily functions like having to go to the bathroom just cease. So you can stay there and stay connected all the time, and you don't feel worn out or beaten or anything. You feel good. So yes, and in my experience, it's the key thing is you have to learn to not be self-centered. You have to learn to get rid of your fears. The fears are the key things that hold you back. And a self-centeredness is just a fear. It's a fear that you're not going to get everything you need. It's a fear that you're not good enough. It's a fear that other people won't like you. So that's one. You're born self-centered because you're a tiny little thing that depends on everybody else, and that's a very centric viewpoint. As you grow up and mature, you get less and less self-centered. You start being aware of other people. And, there's your brothers and sisters and mother and father, and these other people are in the world, and you should learn some respect and some caring for them as well as caring for yourself. And a measure of, of let's see, a measure of being, I think the right word, of being mature. If you want a good measure of being secure, of maturity, it's a measure of how self-centered you are. Because we all know that there are some people who are in their 50s and 60s and they're still self-centered as they were when they were 6. And there's other people who are only 6 and are very thoughtful of other people, very grown up. So maturity is really a measure of self-centeredness. So if you get rid of the self-centeredness, which is fear-based, and you care about people, well, just that caring about them opens you up to another whole world of information and connection. Because you care about people, you'll find that you can understand them. You can feel their emotions. You can hear their thoughts. You can connect with them in a way that enables you to be helpful to them that otherwise you wouldn't be able to be. It helps you say the right thing at the right time. So you connect, as you connect to life, just because you care about people, you start connecting to a much bigger reality in which people are you know, beings just like you. When you have these abilities, you don't see yourself as superior. You just see yourself as different. And you have, you have what can I say, a kind of an urge or you want to be helpful to them. And in that wanting to be helpful, in that wanting to care, then things start to open up. Your world opens up because you're letting go of yourself in a way. You're letting go of your self-centeredness. Life becomes about others and not about you. And that's why I can stand up in front of an audience, all day long, is because it's not about me. It's about them and what I'm saying to them, and are they understanding it? And am I being clear? And are there better words I could use that would help them understand it better? That's my job. And I don't really even think about me. I don't think about how long I've been standing up or anything else. It's all irrelevant. It's like it doesn't make any difference. So when it's all over, I'm not tired. I'm not exhausted because it's been a great day. If I feel like I've maybe changed a couple of people's minds or given them some information they didn't have before. And that's why I'm there. It's just so I can do that. And I don't expect to do that to everyone, but just even if a few people grow a little bit because I was there, then it's worth it. So it's that kind of a thing that opens you up to kind of everything. That attitude is the opener. So with that, yes, you can learn to parallel process. We can be having this conversation at the same time. I can be other places doing other things. I can be talking to you and healing your grandmother who you're telling me about. While you're telling me about her, I'll be healing her. So you can work in 3, 4, and on a good day, even 5 reality frames at the same time. And matter of fact, like I say, most of my life I work between the reality frames of intuitive and intellectual. Those are actually different frames of being. They're like different realities that meet, that are connected. So you work between realities. You don't have to go after information that you need. It comes to you just as you need it. If there's an idea or a concept or something that you need, it pops into your mind and is right there for you. All you have to do is be aware of it and pick it up and use it. So it's not a matter of, and when I was first learning, it was a matter of sitting down or lying down, relaxing, getting into the right state of mind, going out of body, doing the things that I was doing. And it was all a process that I went through. And that process maybe took 10 or 15 minutes. Now it takes fractions of a second. And it's not even a process anymore. It happens all by itself. And it happens as it needs to, when it needs to, and brings me the data that's useful to me at that time. So, yes, I sit here and we're talking, and as we're talking, information comes, information goes. My attention may go someplace else and come back, and it's just all organic. It's not broken into little pigeonholes. Okay, here's San Qing, and I'm talking to him, and we're plugged in. Yeah, well, I'm doing that, but I'm doing other things too. And the whole thing's just organic and works together. That's life. And in general, the more you learn, the more you grow up, the higher quality your consciousness is, the bigger your reality becomes, the larger your decision space. Your decision space is defined as all the choices you have to make at any given time. Well, that gets bigger and bigger. There's lots of choices you can make, but you have lots of information about those choices. But it all flows. It's not, oh, I want this piece of data, so I go out and I grab it. If that piece of data is useful to me, I'll have it. If it isn't, I won't have it. And I really don't care to go find out things that I don't need. I keep telling some of my students that, inquiring egos want to know, and it's kind of a takeoff from the old billboard that said inquiring minds, need to know. It was an educational advertisement at the time. But I changed it a little and say, yeah, acquiring egos would like to know. There's all kinds of interesting things that people say, oh, I'd like to go find out this. I'd like to go, be there at this point in history. I'd like to do all these things. But none of that really matters. What matters is how well doing what you want to do, how will it help you grow up? How will it help you be a better person? How will it help you get rid of your fear? How will it help you be more compassionate? How will it help you see and live in a larger reality? And if it's not going to help you do that, then it's really not important for you to be there and watch Jesus feed the many with his fish. It's just not important. How did this happen? How did that work? What really happened at this point? Doesn't matter. How is it going to help you grow up, and how will it help other people grow up? Those are the questions. And if the answer is, well, probably not going to help them very much, then the answer is, then you're probably mostly wasting your time thinking about it. Best to think thoughts, be places, absorb experience that will help you, help others, and help yourself grow up. Now there's that, which is a main part of life, but then there's also fun. Life should be fun. You should enjoy your time here. You've got this human avatar that you're playing, and this human avatar has all kinds of aspects to it that are just plain fun. And you should do that. You should laugh. You should dance. You should enjoy music. You should connect all the fun and positive things going on in your avatar's life. So we talk about this big world outside of us and the big, and the connections to the larger system and being one with the system. And yes, all that's available, but don't forget you've got a body here, and this is the place where you demonstrate basically what you've learned and how you've learned it. This is the truth. Many people can feel like they're great mystics and highly evolved, but if they've always just sit in a cave someplace contemplating goodness, well, take that person out and set him on the streets of a big city someplace and see how long those contemplations of goodness last. You have to bring all that knowledge and experience home and share it by how you act and interact within the world. So it's important, the people here, having fun here, being a part of this physical virtual reality we call the physical universe, and being an active and I don't know, valuable part of it, being part of the solution, not part of the problem. So yes, there's big pictures, and yes, you have all these things, but you're still a human, and there's love, there's sex, there's children, there's all sorts of things that are going on here that are wonderful, and you should be happy and full of joy, and your life ought to be a big smile. Ought to represent, your life here amongst people here. So you have to, it's always seems to me to be a contradiction when you have a great sage and he complains about, the little people here that are annoying and in the way and are a problem, so on. Well, it shouldn't be that way. If he's a great sage, he ought to love those people who are, instead of being annoying, who are just inquiring and want to know, and he should think about how he could help them rather than complain about them. So it's the big picture takes in everything. It's not that this little physical world is nothing and should be ignored. We shouldn't all go, sit in the lotus position and drift off to bliss and forget the rest of the world. That's not really where it's at. You need to be a part of this world. You need to be a teacher, a helper, and you need to have fun doing whatever you're doing. Needs to be fun. So that's another part of it. If you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. If life isn't joyful, then you're not, your head's not in the right space yet. It's just part of it. So it's all tied together, all one thing. You can't just develop your spirituality intellectually so you can carry on great spiritual discussions with great masters. That's one thing, but that's not really the main thing. The main thing is being, being with people, connecting, not being aloof and withdrawn. And many times people who get into spirituality become withdrawn. they go off to, sit on their mountaintop or whatever, and uh, I don't know, surround themselves with their own wonderfulness, I guess. But if you really are serious about caring for others, then you have to be around others. You can't be exclusive. You have to reach out and connect and laugh and cry and be part of life. So that's another, it's another side of this growing up, is that the more you grow up, the more, in a way, you distance yourself from other people because other people aren't so much like you anymore, but also the more you engage with all those other people. So it all balances out to be a very balanced life and a balanced trip. It's not just being a guru or a wise person or in nirvana, you just want to stay in nirvana all the time, that sort of thing. That's not the point. The point is to live a life fully and, be very, very graceful with uncertainty. So you can live an uncertain life with a lot of uncertain things going on and live it fully and completely and openly and with a lot of fun. So I'd like to paint a picture for your listeners that becoming more and more spiritual doesn't mean that you become a recluse and that you take yourself off to a monastery someplace or you know put yourself up on a higher space and kind of look down at others. It's if you have those kinds of feelings, then that's not spiritual. That's going in another direction. That's just building up your ego in a spiritual looking space, but it's not really a spiritual space. So you're spiritual when you really care about people.
That's
And
that universal thing, right?
yeah,
I mean, we return. That's the whole
yes,
point of returning. And it's like childlike in your nature, yet insightful with the experiential realization. So you can return to that embodying and seeing things at face value, yet having that ability to not judge. As a child, you're just accepting and allowing all things. I'm not looking at race, color, attitude. I'm just embodying that now moment. And it's sort of reflected on observing a child. I always like to look at people when people talk about this endless amount of energy that, even my kids are like, how do you do that, Dad? You're like, you just, you're like, you don't stop. You're able to continue to embrace and embody and share. And you're like, through a course of a day, you don't sit down, you don't get tired, you're just now. And that ability to do that comes from returning to that state. And when you look at a child, I always look at it. So, for the physicality perspective, people are like, well, what do you eat from a Taoist perspective? A Taoist realization of nourishing his physical body returns back to the simplicity of we eat optimally one meal every other day. And people are like, are you out of your mind? That sounds absolutely absurd. Well, when you start to look at the energetic flow and the potential of what you're actually doing to this physical body, people return just through their biological journey as they continue to add more years onto their journey and their realization. Their physical body just naturally returns to that. Um, I eat 1 or 2 meals a day. I eat when I choose to, and most people have been sort of manipulated by this narrative that you need to eat 3 to 5 meals a day, and it's got to be this type of food, and this. It's an absolute fast, in my opinion, because when you look at a child, their behavior gives you the answer to everything. They wake up in the morning, and most of my kids will wake up in the morning and they will play all day. They will embrace their day, embody their life with just love and acceptance of their family. And most of them will turn around and go, it's 5 o'clock. Dad, I think I need something to eat. I'm kind of hungry. And you kind of look at them and it's like, this is them embracing that now moment, embracing life as one. They're not subjecting themselves to this is this way, this is that way. I'm looking to pay my bills. I've got to go find another way to generate an income. I don't like the way Larry thinks about me, as you put it. You know, who am I going to marry, Jill or Jane? All these things are not subject, but part of the evolution from Tom's admission and all the incredible insight that he shares with the audience and everything from a Taoist perspective is being able to embody that, but then return to this state of now, return to this childlike state that is a reference point to help people understand, well, what does that mean for me? You know, if I'm biologically 62 years old and I've experienced all these things that makes me very limited, very contracted, because we return back to that contracting and expanding as being all things. This is what everything is. It's like half glass empty, half glass full, good, bad, up, down, in, out. This is the polarizing effects of what people, quantum physicists, would call the reality, the dimension, the third dimension that we're in, the electromagnetic spectrum. All these types of things are sort of terminologies that help people sort of take these crumbs to put together how they perceive their reality. And we return to that by, how do we realize that now is the most precious thing that you could possess as a human being? And that timeless part, it's like, I have a reputation, and I imagine you do too. People might say it behind your back. I have it too behind my back, to my face. You are the master void of time and space. And I tend to do that, as through this incredible conversation you and I have, we just immerse ourselves into this moment. And however that lies and however that rolls out will be determined by, potentially, if we take the time to look at it, what time space continuum that human beings have created to measure what it is that you've just experienced from our conversation. Yet a great indicator for you to realize whether you're embodying this experience as an experiencer within this human expression of what we consider reality is, you don't know what day it is. You don't know what time it is. And I mean, through your own admission, Tom, you spoke on, I have a calendar, I'm able to refer to it, and so do I. But in reality, most days I'll wake up and it's just another incredible day with my wife and my 6 children, and just being in servitude, being in this selfless state of sharing and giving and contributing to this higher collective consciousness. And you do this without effort. And that's where, you know, within Taoism, we call it this Wu Wei, this effortless action, the effortless effort, what we call being done by the Tao, just the now moment, that embodiment. And so you get that by going, oh, I woke up, it was Monday, now it's Friday again, because you're embodying that, and you're not being measured by this space-time metrics that makes you so limited, makes you so contracted, because you're constantly having to gauge, well, what am I doing now? When am I doing it? How am I doing it? This idea that you have to intellectualize what it is you're experiencing. And so the lofty spiritual journey that Tom is talking about is, it's not, you're cultivating this, but you're not contributing it. So by contributing it, you are me, I am you. This whole idea that we are separate is the part where Tom talks about the large consciousness system, and that ability that when we are in this now moment, all bets are off. Profound, what most people perceive as miracles, take place. But in reality, this is the reality. This is the truth. This is the self-evident truth that's happening. And it only comes from the individual's journey and that return to the childlike state of the love, the acceptance, the now moment. And so that fasting, or returning to the physicality, people call it fasting, we call it resting, nourishing this physical avatar that you refer to as hey, you need to use this. You're here to enjoy it. And I always remind people, don't erase your personality. You're on this spiritual journey and I want to, I want to be enlightened. And the more and more I'm enlightened, I'm I'm very much appreciative of this avatar, as Tom put it. And I like Netflix, chocolate, driving my side by side in the desert at 100 miles an hour. These are things that are part of the human condition that you can embody and then enjoy as part of that story that you're generating, but also be aware that as this multi-dimensional facet or ability to access all these layers, the more and more you refine these skills from someone might call a mystic journey, which when you renew and recultivate it on a daily basis and validate it, this is not mystical. This is not separate from someone's sort of spiritual journey that only they can have it if they believe in a certain thing. Everyone has the ability to access this, and everyone has the hardware and the software. And it's like finding that right center point that gravitates you to this visceral kinesthetic now moment, the knowing moment, that the feeling that tells you that you are in the right place. You're in that Death Star moment where Luke comes in for that one shot. And that's where you find the flow, that wu wei, that effortless effort, being done by the Tao, being done by the universe, being now, being all things. And I love the way that you always remind us to return to that. And that's that love, that's that expression of everyone is the now. Everyone is this beautiful expression of, and I like to remind people, you're the ambassador. Well, Jifu, what does it mean? Give me an understanding. What's the meaning of life? Why am I here? Well, you're here to embody, as you would, this spiritual collective, to raise humanity's awareness of this true return, this return to love, this return to Tao, this return to all things. So you are me, I am you. And I always remind them, I use this incantation from the Jade Emperor. It's quite simplistic, but it's a power abundant in its giving you will receive, unifying the body with the spirit with the energy, bringing heaven to earth, transcending all is one, one is all, revealing perfection manifest. That is your gift. That is your offering. That is your gift. That is your offering. That is your gift. That is your offering, which in turn reminds people of this symbiotic giving and receiving. And that turns into you are me, I am you. If you're in service to others, you're in service to yourself. And people forget that. They're like, oh, okay, sign up for that. Yes, Jeffu, I want more of that. Thank you, sir. May I have another? What are your thoughts on some of the things I've shared with you right now?
Well, I guess I can come from it from a little different perspective. It all sorts out to be about the same thing, but it's just, I have different words and terms and ways of looking at it. But yes, the now, the moment now, of course, is when you make all your choices. You make your choices in the present. And the way life works, as stuff happens, you get to respond to that stuff that happens. You have to make choices. And if you make those choices with low entropy, that is, with love and caring for others, then those are good choices and you evolve. If you make them out of fear, then those are poor choices and you de-evolve. So your quality of consciousness is evolving or de-evolving, and our purpose here is to evolve the quality of consciousness. Of course, as we evolve, the whole system's consciousness evolves because we're part of the system. So we can think of that we are part of the larger conscious system's idea of how to evolve. We evolve, it evolves. We're it, it's us. So that's one thing. The second thing is that we all live in our own reality. Each one of us lives in our own reality. We think that that's not the case. We think that we're all living in a shared reality. There is this reality place, and we're all living in it. But that's really not true. You live in your own reality, and you get data. This is a virtual reality. And like any virtual reality, you're a player. Player gets a data stream from the larger consciousness system. The player then interprets that data to be the reality that he sees. So it's just like if you're playing, World of Warcraft, you log on, you get a stream of data from the computer. That stream of data comes to you in like a million pixels. So you look at those million pixels and you see rivers and streams and trees and other people and so on. You interpret those million pixels, those million dots of light into other things, people and houses and trees and rocks and water. So that's your interpretation, but your interpretation isn't necessarily what was intended. You interpret based on your past, on your own experience, on how much you've grown up, how much fear you have, is all part of that interpretation. So everybody's different in that way because they all have to interpret from their own history base, from their own experience base. So we all live in our own reality, a different reality than everybody else. Now, because it's a multiplayer game in our virtual reality, yes, there's shared things. We all see the same trees and the same houses and so on. We see all that, but that's because it's shared inside the virtual reality. It's not because those things actually exist. Those things don't exist. They don't exist at all. They're just information. So everyone lives in their own reality, defined by their own interpretation of the data they receive. Now, that makes everybody's now moment kind of a precious space of their own in order to make the choices that will either cause them to evolve or de-evolve the quality of their consciousness. So that's kind of how the big picture, works for us. So we're in this virtual reality being served. The server is the larger consciousness system, too. A portion of the larger conscious system is configured to be the server. So it sends us information. Now, if it wants to challenge us, it can serve us particularly challenging things to deal with. If it wishes to give us an easy time in which we can consolidate the things we've learned, maybe it'll give us some benign things, but it sends us a data stream, and as long as the data stream fits the overall multiplayer game, there's no contradictions between things, then everything works out just fine. So I see what we are doing is we're in a multiplayer game with a larger consciousness system. Our purpose here is to evolve the quality of our consciousness. And you do that by becoming love. And in evolving, you become more driven by fear. So, that's kind of my own terminology, for many of the things you said. So the now moment is the moment where you choose, you make choices. So that's, the past is you get the consequences of those choices. The future, there's potential choices that you can make, but in the now is where you actually choose. And so that's the important moment. So when most of us spend our lives trying to manipulate what happens to us, we want to make sure that our children grow up the way we want. We want to make sure that our spouse does this or that, or that, that these things happen and those things don't happen. So we spend most of our life trying to manipulate the world to be the way we want it to be for us. So all that effort on manipulation is pretty much wasted effort. It's much better to just let the world be however it is. Stuff happens, you get to deal with it. Whatever it is, stuff happens, doesn't matter so much. What matters is how you deal with it, what choices you make in that now when you have to make a choice. Do you make choices that are just self-serving, or do you make choices based on a bigger picture than that? So that will help you evolve or de-evolve. So everybody's reality is personal. And we see that all the time. If you have 5 people standing on a street corner watching an accident, they will deliver 5 different accident reports, some of them being much different than others because they get 5 different descriptions from 5 different history bases of how those people interpret the information that they got. So that's just the nature of our reality. So the now is a very important spot in my, kind of in my sense of the world, my own metaphors. It's where the choices are made. The future is just a probable future. The future isn't done yet. We have free will. We can change the future by changing what we do. The past is what we've done collectively. Now, there's a bigger future than just the one we see. There's this future database, which is they call the Akashic Records, but it really started out as just a future database because the larger conscious system needs to know what the possibilities are and what are the probabilities of those possibilities, because it's rendering a virtual reality, and it's rendering from a statistical and probability viewpoint. So it doesn't have the bottoms up. It's not a virtual reality of elementary particles become atoms, become molecules, become the outside world. It's not that kind of modeling. It's modeling from a statistical and probability viewpoint. And our intention modifies that database. Our intent modifies those probabilities. And the way the larger conscious system determines what happens next is it takes a random draw from the probability distribution of the possibilities. And that's what happens next. So, for instance, scientists get a better telescope and they're going to look out where nobody's ever seen before. So it's going to be something new. All right. Now, there's maybe 10,000 different things that could be there. And each one of those has a probability. The larger conscious system takes a random draw from the database, from the from the distribution of possibilities and their probabilities, and that's what's there. You see, it's not that there's always been something there, we just haven't seen it yet. No, that doesn't exist until we look at it. And things can only come into this virtual reality by a player perceiving them, which is why the double slit experiment acts the way it acts. The observer is key to that experiment because virtual realities exist only in the minds of the players. There is no virtual reality. It only exists in the minds of the players. So when the system takes that random draw and says, that's what's out there, and that's what that telescope will see, that's what it sees. But from now on, that becomes part of what's here. And anybody else looks there, they'll have to see that same thing too. And the next thing, right next to that nobody's still seen yet, will be limited now because it'll have to connect to what's already been seen. So once it's here, then we deal with that. It's a historical fact. So that database is necessary for the system to quickly come up with what are the possibilities and what are their probabilities. It has that database, needs it in order to render. All right, now as time goes by, everything that could have happened and the probability it would becomes everything that could have happened and the probability that it did. So now we have the historical database as well, because time's gone on and the future's turned into the past. that has all the possibilities and the probability that they actually would have been actualized by human's choice and come into the game thus. So that is the database. That's the Akashic Records. It exists as a necessary database for the rendering of the reality. Okay, and we can modify those future probabilities. That's how we can make it not rain next Saturday when we have a picnic planned. We just use our intent and we can change the probability of that rain happening next Saturday because we can modify those probabilities. So that's why everybody has, that kind of gives you the sense of everybody lives in their own world, yet it's a shared experience in that it's a multiplayer game. But we all look at those, million dots of light, and what we come up with comes out of our own experience. So if we've never heard of a tree, we've never seen a tree, it's just not part of our experience, we'll look at those dots of light and we'll never, we won't see anything that we'll point at and say tree. It won't be in there. We'll just see something and won't particularly know what it is. Won't be able to place it. So we'll guess at what it is. We'll say, oh, it's I don't know, a green smear of some sort, algae, or we'll come up with some other thing because the way our minds work is we do pattern matching. We match patterns to our historical database, and that's how we tell what things are. So when you go out of body, for instance, and you run into things that you've never seen before, things you've never interacted with before, well, you go try to pattern match them. And when you explain to somebody else what it was, you probably hem and haw a lot. Well, I don't know exactly. You have a hard time describing it, but you'll say it was sort of like this, and that's your best pattern match. But it may not have actually been like that hardly at all. That's just the best you could do. So now we see that our out-of-body experience is really just a one-on-one single-player game, not a multiplayer game, but a single-player game with a larger consciousness system. That's an out-of-body. So when you leave this reality, you drop this data stream, you get a different data stream, and that data stream's usually not a multiplayer game. It's usually a game between you and the LCS. And it will give you information that is an experience. That information, you will define it as an experience. And that experience almost always will have something in it that will help you learn something that you need to learn, because that's the kind of experiences the larger conscious system gives you. It's there to help you, succeed, because as you evolve, it evolves because you're part of it. So it wants us to succeed. So we have help from this larger consciousness system that helps us make good choices by giving us the kind of choices that have potential for us to grow up. But we have free will, so we can make bad choices if we want to. That's our right to make bad choices. So that's kind of the my look at reality. That's kind of the metaphors I use to put it in context. So the now moment is important. It's significant. That's where all the choices are made. The reality is a virtual reality, and it exists only in the minds of the players. And we share it in a when it's meant for a bunch of people, reality that's a multiplayer game, different than a single player game. A single player game could be a dream, or it could be an out of body, or it could be a lucid dream. It could be any of those things, and they're basically single player games. So when you get an out of body, you should explore it as to where's the lesson? What should I learn? And in all of those realms, whether it's this realm we call the physical universe, or whether it's an out of body, or whether it's a dream, or any other kind of experience you have, in all those experiences, they're all the same. You're getting information, you interpret the information, and by the choices you make, you evolve or you de-evolve the quality of your consciousness. So that dream, that out of body, is just as important and significant to you as this physical universe as far as your growth goes. every choice you make in any reality frame will affect the quality of your consciousness. It'll either go up, go down, or stay the same based on the quality of the choice. Now, talking about the quality of the choice, ethics, what's good, what's bad, what's wrong, and what's right, those are now all just defined as by entropy. If the long-term effect of a choice is lower entropy, and entropy means more love, more caring, more whatever, like that, then it's a good choice. And if that thing is, if that choice is one that creates more entropy, and in the long run, not necessarily in the short run, but in the long run, everything settles out, it creates entropy, then that was a bad choice. So same with right and wrong. The things you do that lower entropy in the long term are good things. The things you do that raise entropy in the long term are bad things. So the model then develops a model of right and wrong, good and bad, that sort of thing. Now, everybody doesn't have an entropy meter that they can say, oh, here's an idea. What's the entropy of that idea? You don't have an entropy meter, but what you do have is a mind that can consider all the possibilities, at least that you can think of. Now, we're not all that smart, so we can't think of but maybe 2 or 3 levels out before we get lost in what affects who. But we do our best due diligence to think about our choices and make sure that those choices lower entropy in the long term as much as possible. So that's a due diligence. We're thinking, should I marry Sally or Sue? You think about, well, where might that end up and how might that end up and what's the lower or higher entropy? Or should I do this or should I do that? That's how you make your choices. Now, once you've done due diligence, you just do it. That's your choice. You just do it. Even though you don't have an entropy meter that's accurate, you don't know you've made the right choice, but you just do it anyway. And then you reflect on it and say, look back at it with time and say, was that a good choice? Was that an optimal choice? How did that work out for me and everybody else? And you learn from that. If you made mistakes and did something that was higher entropy, you learn from that. And you ask questions like, well, where did I miss it? Where did my due diligence did I not see that there was going to be this big hole that a lot of people were going to fall in? Where did I miss that point? And you learn from it. So the way life works is that you do, stuff happens. You do your due diligence in trying to make low entropy choices. You just do whatever your choice is and you learn from it. So now, if you've done your due diligence and it turns out that you didn't consider all the things, it was a bad choice, there's no big detriment for that. You did your best. That's okay. That's how you're supposed to learn, by doing your best, then assessing it later, learning what you can learn from it, and go on. So making poor choices is not a terrible thing. Not learning from those poor choices is a terrible thing. It's a waste of an opportunity to learn, to grow up. So that's kind of the way life moves in my model, is that you don't worry about what happens. You don't try to manipulate it. You just let it happen. You deal with it. How you deal with it's very important. Due diligence, make your choice, look back and learn. If it was a good choice and everybody prospered, wow, pat yourself on the back. That was a good choice. Try to make more good choices. If it was not all that good, some bad, you look at the bad and say, how could I have done it better? Learn from it. Next time you'll do better. So that's kind of the process of growing up and learning, growing, getting rid of your fears, raising your quality as you go through life. There's no penalty for making poor choices. There's only a penalty for not learning, and that penalty is you get to do it again. That's the that's your punishment for not getting it right, is that you have to do it again until you do get it right. So there's
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's really interesting because we always return back to the simplicity of that bellows. it's still the contracting and expanding. It's like within Taoism, one of the first verses of the Tao Te Ching is, the way to walk is not the way. The name that is named is not the name. Tao is both named and nameless. And with that very essence, we always look at things as that contracting and expanding moment. The contraction is actually an expansion. So when you're at your lowest, you're at your highest. And that's that center point that you refer to as that choice, that now moment. What choice are you making? Is it really your lowest, or is it really your highest? What are you going to choose to do? Are you going to choose to be half empty or half full? And this is just, I just love the way that it's embodied within everything that you have received in your understanding of the universe, and how it absolutely is reflected in a Taoist path in its own facets, right? Within Taoism, we just call it
Mm-hmm.
perfection. The
Mm-hmm.
diamond is perfection, and everything is a facet of that diamond, a slither of consciousness that brings us to that one point that refers to your large consciousness system, and that everyone has their own journey, and that's their own reality. Each
Yes.
reality is its own.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. I have people come up to me in almost every event that I do, and they'll say, "You must be a Tibetan Buddhist," because everything you're saying, I've been studying Tibetan Buddhism for the last 15 years, and everything you say is what the Tibetan Buddhists live in. Somebody else will say, you must be what some kind of shaman, and you must be a Zen person, and you must be, and I've been called that I must be one of every kind of philosophy that's out there, because mine seems to embody every all the what we call them, the mystical schools, the schools that aren't bound to the physical reality, the mystical schools. So I hear that a lot. So I'm not surprised at all that my work in Taoism, are on the right path. My work in Buddhism are, like brothers. My work, and so it just is that way. I think what I have done is I don't come up with anything new in the sense that the concepts, have never been thought of before. They've been thought up. I say this is a virtual reality. The Buddha said the reality was what, an illusion. To me, it's the same thing. It's just different words from a different time. The words virtual reality didn't exist back 200, 2000, 2,500 years ago when Buddha spoke them. So
Well, that refers to
much
the
of what I
same thing.
say is embodied in the wisdom that's out there. I just re, I've reorganized it into a language of today. And I've tried to make it as left brain as possible because I'm pretty strongly left brain as well. So I want that scientists and engineers and thinkers can follow this path and not throw it away because they can't understand the poetry. If you take a left brain engineer or science person and you give them, the Bhagavad Gita, they'll say, okay, there's this guy on a chariot and he's in some kind of war, and what the hell is all that about? I can't use this book because he can't understand the poetry. He can't interpret it to the meaning that was, embodied in it. He doesn't see it. He just sees, the literal facts that are given to him, and they don't make any sense. So I want my books to be an on-ramp for the scientists and the engineers and the left brain people who need logical process to get there. So I make all my metaphors in terms of things that these people understand. So I use computer science metaphors a lot because they're very accurate. Consciousness is an information system. That's what it does. It makes choices. It has memory. All these things are necessary components of an information system. Anyway, so my repackaging, it's the same truth. Buddha sat under a tree and he got the truth, and Muhammad did something, he got the truth, and the truth has been in the ancient Chinese literature and the ancient Indian literature for what 10,000 years or something that's bubbled down. Anybody who has the time to sit down and explore their own consciousness will end up at the same truth. I mean, there's one truth, but there's a million different ways to describe that truth and a million different ways to get to that truth, to become it. But there is just one truth. So we all end up with the same endpoints. But my language is contemporary with the 2000s in language that is easily understood. Mine doesn't have any poetry on it that needs to be interpreted. Mine's just straightforward. Here's the way it works. So at least that's what I've tried to do. That was my purpose and point for writing it all down, was to take this journey that I had discovered. Mostly started out through the out of body process and understanding the things that were paranormal and how did they work and why did they work. And as you do that, you get a bigger and bigger sense of reality. Why is this database out there? Okay, I know there's a database. I can get data out of it, but why? Where does it come from? Who put it there, and why did they put it there? So all these questions I tried to answer and come up with one overarching understanding that describes all of it. I'm also a physicist, so I know all the other, you know, objective rules too, all the objective truths and all the the subjective mind truths. I'm able to work those out. And now, what's a set of concepts I can make that runs through all of those and just one description and put it in logical terms and put it in a vocabulary of metaphors that are available today to make it easy for those left brain hard-headed types to walk that path and get there, because the people who are more right-brained and more open to their intuitive side, they've got 100 different books that they can, there's 100 different paths that they can take and read and learn. The science guys, the left brainers who want logical process, they don't really have any path to get them to spiritual truths. So I wanted this to be an on ramp for them. So that's really why I wrote the books the way I did. It was my experience put into a left brain explanation, and that's what MBT is, and that's my effort. So yes, I sound just like you know Buddha, and I sound just like you know the Taoism, and I sound like Zen, and I sound like all of these things. Um, but that's because it's just one truth, for those who find that truth. And it's a lifetime, excursion to find those truths. But if you work at it, you can find them. And if you do, you'll end up with the same answer that everybody else ended up with and found the same truth that you did. But how you express it is where I actually have tried to make a difference and do something different, because the ancient truths are poetry that must be understood. They were written in ancient times for ancient people with ancient vocabularies, and we do marvelously good jobs at interpreting and reading. I've read what the Tao Te Ching
Tao Te
and
Ching. Yeah.
yeah, and other uh, uh,
Well, it's
Taoist things.
yeah.
Yeah, I've read those, and I love them. They're beautiful, but they're poetry. You have to understand the meaning of what's being said. And Zen's the same way. Yeah, that's the sound of one hand clapping, and all the left brainers go, "What the hell does that mean? That's a bunch of garbage." And the right brainers can understand, that is a metaphor for something that is significant. But in any way, that's kind of where MBT comes from. It's my own understanding of reality, my own journey, and me trying to put it in words that left brain logical types won't throw away, and they can actually find an on ramp to the bigger picture, to a spiritual space, and not just be stuck in their material space. But they have to get there logically. They can't get there because that's not the way their minds work. If they don't see the logic, then they're not going. They'll do just what they told you. I can't go there. Sorry. I just can't think those thoughts because I've got this belief, and this belief has trapped me into only thinking this little subset of thoughts. So I try to get them a way that they can walk out of that trap.
Well,
So that's mainly what my work is about.
you mentioned the Tao Te Ching, and for a Taoist seeker, it's like the magical register. We call it the magical register. I actually, strangely enough, just transcribed the 2024 version with Latsu, my teacher, and just for the audience to understand, as the LCS is, Tom's reference of direct source information, the source, as is my symbiotic relationship with my teachers. They're facets of that one diamond that we call the perfection. So when I have a dialogue with a spirit entity giving me direct source information, it's a dialogue leading to a monologue. The monologue is that now moment, that information, getting it directly. So I actually transcribed the 2024 version of the Tao Te Ching, which I published. And so that's a really a little bit more contemporary. Probably maybe it would parallel or be the little brother or sister to your MBT version, but we refer to it as that because every verse is literally reiterating the same thing, which is another facet of consciousness and realizing that return to who you really are, that knowing. And so, I love the way that you talk about your exploration starting using OBEs. And I think a lot of people tend to use that as an entry level, some paranormal experience that cannot be qualified or quantified by their reality from that moment. And so within Taoism, we always remind people, let the man who's never left the village, let him know he's seen the world. And that returns back to here. And so when Tom and I have spoken of this in the past, when you're really going out, you're going in. You're going inside to a deeper understanding. And so for a deciphering of something that might be ancient and converted to contemporary, that very knowing that everything lies within you is sort of like another gateway for someone's consciousness, perhaps. But it is that the version that I'll send you a copy. You might be interested to read it. And it just changes the viewpoint of people because he's given more insight and making it more in the way that can be digested instead of someone turning it to a poetic sort of like a transitory moment of bliss that only lasts a few seconds. Oh, I really enjoyed that. Now I'm moving on with my reality, which we tend to refer to that within Taoism. It's like people will read the Tao Te Ching and they'll think of it from time to time, and then there's others that will dismiss it and laugh at it, and then there's others that embody it and know it to be their very truth, which is referring right back to your realization and knowing that everything through the LCS is the experience's individual reality, that this is your level up, this is your game, and you're playing the game, and it will be fed to you as you perceive it. And so thank you, sir. May I have another, that Oliver Twist moment? You want more? If you ask for more, you will receive it. It's like the echoing effects of be careful what you wish for. That's exactly what will be generated within your simulated game. The holographic sort of journey that we're having here. This moment is really by your attention intention. That very center point, the center point to all things, is that. And so it's only generated from, someone might conceive it within a quantum model of a light to wave to matter to particle realization, that your attention intention creates this very moment. Someone might go, oh, well, it's the 0 point that creates the scalar wave. Whatever it is, I'm a show me guy. And I believe you are too, in the sense of the skepticism will remain the same unless you can show me or materialize something that will validate this very moment. And that's what the human seeker does. It's like, let's validate this very moment by show me the state of bliss, the love, the return to the Tao, by what I'm experiencing. And so everything we're experiencing in this conversation, anyone observing this can feel it. They can feel it and go, wow. All my students love me having conversations with people on podcasts, and specifically your conversation, because they get high as a kite. They embody that moment, and there's just so much now moment of love, that amplitude of energy, that realization, and people are just, I just can't get enough. And that can also be reflected in someone's observer by just saying, and I referred to a couple of passing comments that were made in our last conversation. Oh my goodness, it's so great to see Tom speak on things that are more esoteric. And of course, this for you is just another slice of the pie, of the same pie, of the one pie. And this is just what they want from their LCS, and they're getting it through the conversation.
Yes, we're all talking about the same thing, just in different ways and different words, and it's all we're all experiencing the same path. Well, I shouldn't say that. We're experiencing different paths, but it's all taking us to the same place. It's a wonderful, I don't know what to call it, I guess experiment, to be in. The larger conscious system has this virtual reality that we call our physical universe, but it's got other virtual realities as well. This is not the only one. It doesn't put all of its eggs in one basket. It has different virtual realities because it wants to know what's the optimal for encouraging people to grow up. So it tries different things. I've been to, half a dozen to a dozen different reality frames that are quite different than this one. And you can visit them by staying on the outside, but hearing what they say and being able to speak to them. But then it's a mind-to-mind connection only. They don't see you. You don't physically interact with them within what they call physical. But you can also get permission from the LCS to get inserted into the rendering engine and go there physically. So you can shake their hand and look eyeball to eyeball, physical body to physical body, and go visit for a while with the body. You can do that too, just to see what it's like and how people live in that particular virtual reality. So they have their own universe, and there's multiple of those around, and you see lots of patterns. You see young men, and they go out of body, and they right away start fighting. They go, these are the 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, and they get out of body for the first time, and they see evil creatures and bad things, and they whip out their sword of truth, and they fight, and they do Bruce Lee maneuvers, and they go through all this stuff fighting the evil who are doing evil things, and they continue to do that until they outgrow it. When they outgrow it and realize that, fighting evil is not really the key thing here. It's caring and loving and helping and that sort of thing. That then they let it go, and after that they don't find evil things there. There aren't any evil things there. Those are just that's just what the larger conscious system sends them, because that's where they are. That's at the point they've evolved to, that point where they see that this is right and that's wrong, and they want to dispose of the wrong, and that's their way of dealing with what's wrong, is by killing it. Which of course is not the is not the optimal answer, to the problem, but that's just where they happen to be. So that's what they get. And then eventually those adventures in out of body, fighting monsters, kind of goes away as they grow up and get a bigger viewpoint on things. But yeah, so it's pretty typical, when you talk to young males who get out of body, that they'll tell you all these stories of violence and evil and that kind of stuff. But it's, they don't realize it's just a one-on-one virtual reality that they in the larger conscious system are playing. And the system gives them stuff that they can learn from, that they can grow from. So every time they have an opportunity to approach it differently, but they tend to approach it with violence rather than other ways. So what they get is violence back, and that's where they are. So the system gives them encouragement, tries to help them out some, but basically they just have to learn that that's not the best approach to dealing with those sorts of things. So there's really nothing evil out there. And if a monster runs up to you and you just say, "Hi, monster, have a nice day," the monster will turn into dust, turn into smoke and disappear. It's just there as a fear test, just to see how fearful you are. If you scream and run away, then you shouldn't go out of body yet. You need to grow up a little bit first before you go there, because the fears are going to create all kinds of ugly stuff for you. Your fears will manifest there. We can manifest things here in this physical reality with a strong intent, but there you can manifest things just real easily. You can manifest whatever you want very quickly. So if you have a lot of fears, well, what you're going to do is manifest those fears, and now you'll have to deal with them face to face rather than pushed under the rug where you keep them, trying to keep them, under control. So it's the outer body it's a good place to start, but like all the paranormal things, it's not a place to linger too long. You start until you master it, and after you master it, you let it go. And it's paranormal's not important, but it does serve as a good teacher for a lot of people who are interested in those phenomena. They can get there, but it almost always ends up helping a person grow up, because once they learn some paranormal things, they start getting a bigger picture. Oh, it's not just this little physical world. There's a bigger picture. And as that picture, as that door to the bigger picture opens up a little bit, they also find themselves caring a little more about other people, not just themselves. They kind of lose that self-centered viewpoint of being in a little material picture where nothing really matters, where we're just here, we die, and we're gone. So what? That kind of nihilist attitude kind of falls away, and they start thinking bigger thoughts, and pretty soon, they've grown up a bit. So I think that the paranormal tends to be a good first step for a lot of people, but they do have to learn that it's not really important by itself. It is a good first step, but you wouldn't want to make your life, in the paranormal. That's some people do. They read fortunes or they do things like that, but that is more likely to get you stuck than anything else. You don't want to get stuck there.
Well, I mean, those type of cultivational practices, having been involved in teaching people this sort of alchemy stuff for 30 years, they get caught up in it. And I can levitate now, and I can heal people, and I am the next avatar of the great coming of Jesus. And this in of itself is that limited viewpoint. And it's like the thing that excites me without question, through my own admission, is witnessing people heal, return to themselves, whether it's mental, emotional, physical. They return. That gets me all warm and fuzzy, which returns back to that servitude, that selfless act of giving is receiving, is sharing, and adding to that awareness, that conscious collective that we speak of. And the more you do that, you get more of the same, that sort of mirroring effect that takes place. It's like that's that part where people are like, well, what does that mean, Jifu? The mirroring effect, what is going on? Well, this is the very realization, returning once again to the bellows, once again to the yin yang, once again to the LCS. I mean, we have these versions that are just reminding us of that profound realization.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been fun.
And I really am really grateful that we've had this conversation and we've gone to places where I believe people want to hear more of how you share that and how you embody it and how what it means to them from different angles. Because personally, I could be here indefinitely. If I didn't need sustenance for this physical avatar, we could have conversations for days. And
Yeah.
it's really profound. I really want to thank you for sharing your time with me today and the audience today. Um,
I'm also grateful that you got connected to me and I got connected to you, and we can both broaden our audiences, because understanding and information that's helpful is wonderful, but sharing it is even more wonderful. So the more people we can help themselves, the more good we can do, then that's what I'm sure both of us want to do. That's the name of the game, is being useful and being helpful. Service is the name of the game. So you give me an opportunity to speak to your crowd, your audience that follows you. And because you'll also be on my website, a whole lot of my people will also, get to find out about you and your space and so on. And it's good to have different spaces, because people don't all find meaning in the same metaphors. Some people find these metaphors really, talk to them, and others find different metaphors talk to them. So you don't want to just have one thing. You want to have 100 different, Tom Campbell's and San Qing is what it says on your name there. You want to have hundreds of
San
you and
Qing, yeah,
and
yeah. I
hundreds of
mean,
me. You want a lot of people, and of course they're not going to do the same things that you and I do. Most of them will have part of a picture. They'll have some piece of the picture figured out, and the rest of it they don't really understand. But that's all right. Let them talk about the piece that they understand, and that's terrific. That there's some stuff they don't understand, that's irrelevant. It all adds to getting people moving in the right direction. So the 10,000 people saying what we say 10,000 different ways, yay for them. I'm all in favor of boosting them up. And by crosstalk, you coming and talking to my people and me talking to your people, I think that just makes everything better for everybody. So I'm a big fan of spreading the word by discussion with others and letting them view their metaphors that they use and the symbology they use and the words that they use to describe these things, because some of my people will resonate with the things that you say better than they resonate with what I say. And great, they need to find you and they need to work that. That's better that they do that, and rather than stay in a place where they have a hard time because it's too logical, it's too cerebral, it's too whatever. They don't like that. They want it to be a little more right brained, a little more intuitive. So it's good that we have lots of different people from different directions helping others join us in our quest to find truth and to live meaningful, prosperous, happy, fun lives.
well, I always, man, you must you must feel your ears burn because I mention your name quite often because it's always good. I think people don't understand how important it is, and just from a learning perspective to embody stuff. When you create a dialogue and you reference other points of information that can be valid, and that's why Tom and I use metaphors, is to embody that so that the seeker can now embrace it and it sort of falls into their level of consciousness and they start to realize it as their truth. They go, oh, okay, that makes sense to me. That resonation of whatever that is now valid for me, and I can identify with it as something that I know. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, different metaphors are needed. Different people, different personalities. It's all needed. So I'm glad you exist and that, you're out there doing your thing. And I'm glad that, you know, that I
I agree.
exist and lots of other people. I mean, we got lots of people in this growth area, And I think all of them are positive. Well, most of them are positive anyway. And that's good because we have the first chance ever as a species to take a big step. We've never had that before. In the time when Taoism was just being pulled together by the masters, and when Buddhism was just being pulled together, and you know, all the rest. Those those times, could only speak to a handful of people. The guy could get up on a big rock and talk, and maybe as many as 50 people could hear what he was saying, but that was about as far as it went. And after millennia goes by, there's only tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of people that are engaged in those things. Well, 100,000 people is not even a tenth of a percent, so most all these ideas exist in the margins. You know, even all the mainstream religions just exist in the margins. They're not mainstream. But we have the communications now that ideas aren't limited to 50 people they can hear. They're, 6 or 7 billion people are connected. They may not all have their own computer, but they're connected some which way through its friends or whatever. They're all connected. And that means that ideas can travel very fast. It can change, the world can change. If you can change a perspective of 200 million people, which is still a drop in the bucket of 9 billion, but even 200 million people, if you can change just that tiny percentage of them, that would go a long way to raising the consciousness of humanity. Go a real long way. So getting out of the margins into the mainstream is one of the things I would dearly like to do, which is one of the reasons that I'm kind of working through the science doorway. I have a bunch of quantum physics experiments that are being done at universities that'll help provide evidence for my viewpoints. So I'm working through the science doorway because if you can get the science community to agree with you that, I call the scientists the high priests of Western culture. The high priest's job are to tell everybody else what to believe. Maybe one day we won't need any high priests, but right now we do need high priests, and they tell everybody else what to believe. So the physicists are in that position now. They're the high priests of Western culture. If the physicists say, "Oh, this is the way the world is," everybody nods their head and say, "Yep, that must be the way the world is," because that's what the physicists tell us, and they only speak the facts. But anyway, if I can get them to be on my side because I have a better physics, then that will help us get to the mainstream faster. You've got to either go through them or around them. It's easier to go through them, I think, than it is around them. So I'm working on the science side of it. I've got this September, I'm doing a symposium here in Huntsville. It's called Science and Consciousness. So just trying to stir up some interest and get some science people involved in the logic that takes them way beyond materialism. So that's part of what I'm trying to do through that door. The door of philosophy has been there all along with a lot of great philosophy, a lot of super brilliant people who have figured out the way the world works, but it stays in the margins. There's, yes, hundreds of thousands of people that support it, or even millions of people, but millions of people out of 9 billion, just 1 billion is 1,000 million people, and we got 9 billion. So that's a lot of people. If we could just get 10% to have a bigger picture, that would maybe turn all the rest, because those 10% would be happier, more functional, more positive, and their contribution to the collective consciousness would be really stronger than average. So that would help. So that's one of the things I'm doing. I'm trying to work the scientist angle to see if I can't break through there. Otherwise, it's just slogging along, sharing with you and other people, getting more words out to more people in more ways, and we just keep that up. But I'm hoping the science thing pays off, that I can get some to break that belief system in materialism, because my model is very logical. There's no place where you get to the point that you don't have a logical step to the next place. It's all logic driven, but it's hard to get them even to look at it.
Well, I was going to say that's the sort of like lockdown, shutdown. They won't even listen.
No,
Yeah.
no. But I can now do things they can't do. I can now solve physics problems they can't solve. So that maybe will help open the doors a little. I can explain, quantum physics. It's not weird science. It's perfectly rational science, and I can explain why. What happens when that probability distribution collapses to a physical particle? Well, that's a crazy thing to say. Probability distributions don't collapse to physical particles. It's kind of a silly thing to say in the first place. It doesn't work that way. And I can tell them exactly how it does work. The mechanism that works is that a random draw is taken from a probability distribution of the possibilities. That's what's going on, and this is a virtual reality. And if you marry those ideas together, then bingo, you've solved the problem. Why is speed of light a constant? That's another big mystery that kind of moves relativity. That's simple. If you live in a reality that has a grid, a spatial grid and a time grid, so that every delta t you compute the next, you compute all the changes that are in there, then speed of light, is basically the fastest that you can move through that virtual reality, which is 1 delta x for every delta t. That's it. World of Warcraft has a speed limit too. The Sims has a speed limit. Every virtual reality has a speed limit. 1 delta x for 1 delta t. Depends on how big delta x and delta t are. If they're really, really small, then it looks like it's all continuous. But if they get bigger, you see little jerky motion. But that's why the speed of light's a constant, because you can't go any faster than that. It's a virtual reality. And I just explain a lot of things they can't explain. Why are there 5 cosmic constants that are all tuned to each other down to 9 decimal places? If you changed any one of these cosmic constants in the 9th decimal place, make it different, then the whole universe would have collapsed a long time ago. Things would have, gravitation is one of those. Cosmic constants is a gravitational constant. So all of these things have to be just exactly tuned to each other. And if you have a materialistic science, then all that has to happen randomly. Well, how do 5 numbers get tuned to each other to 9 decimal places randomly? that's a bit silly. You can't. That doesn't happen randomly. That has to happen for a reason, and it does, because it's the virtual reality. This reality is not programmed; it's evolved. So you start with a rule set, which we call science. You start with initial conditions, which we call a ball of plasma, high energy, high temperature, and the Big Bang ball of plasma, and you push the run button, and you let the plasma change according to the rule set. And okay, Big Bang take 1. Now that exploded and didn't work. Let's take just the numbers. Big Bang, big digital bang take 2. Well, it's a little better, went a little longer, but still crashed. So, big digital bang, take 3,000. Great. We got all these numbers just tuned perfectly to each other, and this thing has stability, and it's just going to keep on going until we evolve something that's useful for us. So anyway, that's answers that. It's just part of evolution, and how do sometimes people with no brains do smart things. There are people who have nothing more than maybe a half a centimeter of brain lining the inside of their skull. All the rest of it's gone. They were born with encephalitis, where their cranial cavity was all full of water, so the brain never developed. And for these people, some of these people that science did not know about, they didn't do the ultrasound, they didn't do the things and said, "Oh, your baby's head's full of water," so nobody knew. So because nobody knew, the system was able to just bring these people along. They're working on their master degrees in mathematics. They have degrees in, all kinds of subjects. They're smart. They have families. They function as normal people, yet they don't have a speech center, a motion center. They don't have any of the stuff that it takes to run a body. They just have this tiny little thin film on the inside their skulls. Well, how does that happen? Well, it's not too hard to explain. If you got an LCS, this is a virtual reality. Anything can happen in a virtual reality. If the if the source that's creating that virtual reality wants it to happen, it's just easy. You just put it in a data stream and there it is. And why would it do that? Well, to help us open that crack in that door a little bit to see this is a bigger reality than we thought. So, how does it make sure that happens? Well, these people seem to have a car accident when they're adults and they've already finished graduate school and they're professors of mathematics someplace. They get in an automobile accident and they do a brain scan, and oh my God, there's no brain in there. How'd that happen? Well, the LCS also made the accident happen, then it made the brain scan happen so that we would know that people with no brains sometimes can be very functional. Now, if we know about it ahead of time and we do a brain scan, or not a scan, but like a sound scan or something, we can, oh no, this baby's head's full of water. They have encephalitis, they'll never be normal, they'll be always severely retarded. Well, those babies are always severely retarded because we found out about them. The information came into the virtual reality, so now it's here. You got to live with it. But when we don't find out about them, that data is not here. So we don't have to live with it. They can live normal lives. So there's lots of things like that, plus all the paranormal things. I can explain exactly how, remote viewing works, seeing without eyes, mind-to-mind communications. All of those are just, I can explain very logically. Physics can't. They can't explain any of that stuff. They're stuck. There's a whole bunch of things that they can't explain. There's a bunch of things philosophy can't explain. I can explain that. There's a bunch of things that theology can't explain, and I can explain those. So that's what I'm hoping will help me break through, maybe someday, into the mainstream. I may not live long enough to see it, but I'm hoping that someday we'll break through to the mainstream, and then all of the organizations like yours and the thousands of others, suddenly they'll have scientific foundation built underneath of them that says, yes, this is the way the world works. And they will now be seen not as some quirky, mystical thing, but in fact, science. It's the way the world works. Consciousness is fundamental. And all of these various worldviews, most of them are all about consciousness, about what's inside. It's not what's outside, it's what's inside that matters. And so I'm hoping that will work that way someday. But if somebody comes up with something better that works better than that, I'm happy to jump behind that too, whatever works. But we've got to help change this world from such a low quality of consciousness to a higher quality of consciousness so people aren't so rude and crude and nasty to each other. That's important. Our civilization is suffering, and a lot of people are suffering because, we have so much fear. And if we could just fix 2%, 3%, I think that would catch on like fire, and the rest would follow in a decade. But 2 or 3% is a lot. 2 or 3% of 9 billion people is a whole lot of people. That's hundreds and hundreds of millions of people. So that's where I hope to go. That's what I
Well,
hope to be a part of in any case. Whether I go there or whether I follow somebody else there is irrelevant to me. It doesn't make any difference. But that's where I see all of us headed to try to make that story that the spiritual is a real thing. It's about consciousness, which is what we are. We're not bodies. We're consciousness. And if you want to call consciousness spirit, well, that's okay. That fits. The description fits reasonably well. So that's what we need to do. And now we have an internet. We can do it. There's something that talks to that many people. And if we got just, a few 100,000 people would make a splash. A few million people would make a big splash on the internet. Lots of people would come off to see what we're talking about. And many of those would say, "Oh yeah, these are good ideas," and it would just grow because most people are looking for an answer, for a way out. They know this world is dysfunctional. They know their politics is dysfunctional. They know their economic systems are dysfunctional. They know their cultures are dysfunctional, but they just don't know of a way out. They don't have anything to replace it with. This, of course, would replace that. All those things are just that's just our choices. If we started making good choices that were low entropy and loving and caring, well, all that stuff would just fix itself. That would go away. It's our it's our fear that keeps us trapped in this negativity. So that's kind of my purpose, why I'm here, why I wrote the book, and hopefully where your conversation with me and mine with you will help somehow, someday break this log jam and get us into the mainstream. And if we do, I'd say 3 decades, this planet would be a peaceful, caring, sustainable place. It wouldn't take long. We
no.
can we can turn it around almost on a dime if you think that human beings have been walking around. Homo sapien has been walking around for 200,000 years. 2 or 3 decades is like a eye blink. But we could do it quickly if we could just break into the mainstream and get more people to consider the possibilities. Just consider the possibilities. But they've never been presented with something rational and logical. They've only been presented with traditional religions that are about collecting money in the plate more than anything else. That's kind of the
A control mechanism,
yeah,
and not even a religion, an organized religion, something that
yes,
is limited at best.
yes,
I always refer to it as if you come from neurology, biology, Scientology, Judaism, it doesn't matter. You're limited. You need to be able to allow yourself to accept everything as one. And that, of course, comes right back to how you're integrating your relationship with science and the LCS and being able to speak to others about something that they think is foreign. And that's why I'm so grateful for our friendship because I'm going to be a big support system for you and continue in the future as we continue to build this library of information for people. And that's really what it's here for, is to
yep,
keep supporting that, reinforcing it.
yep, absolutely. And I will be support for you too. I'd like to be the kind of in the logical people's minds, I'd like to be the foundation, the logical foundation underneath, your metaphors.
Yes.
It works, you know, it works great that way because
Yeah.
my foundation is basically your foundation. But if I can make mine so that the left brainers can climb on board, well, that would be very helpful because the left brainers are the movers, the shakers, the people who define, the kind of culture we have for the most part. The really big thinkers and the mystics and the people who understand the bigger picture, they're all in the margins. It's this mainstream that we need to get either into the margins or get the margins out to them. Yeah, these ideas have been around forever. Thousands and thousands of years they've been around. It's not a new invention. It's just putting it in a language that people can understand and relate to. That's, I think, the key. Well, anyway, thank you so much for
Thank you, Tom.
inviting me. I
Yeah.
appreciate the opportunity to talk to your people, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to talk to mine.
And it's always welcomed our conversation. And I'm just very grateful for you and everything that you contribute. So we will talk again soon, my friend.
I hope so. So I will see you next time.
I'll see you next time.